You asked and I'm going to answer. It's the 136,755 subscriber Q&A. Doesn't really have the same ring to it as the 130K Q&A or the 140K Q&A, but what can I say? We're at 136,000 subscribers, 136,755 subscribers, and so your questions, my answers. Prof, what's your creature type? Obviously human, but advisor? Rebel? Academic, obviously, and I would be a creature token that's a 0/1 with no abilities whatsoever, but really nice art. What do you think of Shadows over Innistrad? I think it's great. I'm loving it, especially since I wasn't a big fan of the whole Return to Zendikar block, but Shadows over Innistrad all across the board. I love the mechanics, I love the gameplay, I love the flavor. It's really a home run set by Wizards of the Coast. Is it as great as original Innistrad? Not even close, but that doesn't mean it isn't a spectacular set nonetheless. What do you think of wrestling? Do you watch WWE, WWF, and if so, do you have a favorite wrestler? Never got into wrestling whatsoever. I've never really watched any wrestling or boxing or any type of martial arts sort of sports. I don't like that sort of thing. I've always been against the physical. I never liked sports in general. But there's something about wrestling and boxing and other kinds of combat sports that I have a particular distaste for. I'm very, very pacifistic. I don't like fighting. Fighting makes me uncomfortable. And even though I know that the type of wrestling that this person asked about is more performance and staged and more a demonstration of physical skill than any actual real fight, I still find myself disinterested in it as spectator sport. Many YouTubers present a persona of themselves, so how much of what we are seeing is the real you? Well, I would say that while this is a kind of persona in that it is a version of myself, there is still myself in it. This is very much what I'm like when you're around me, when I'm socializing. This is social me that you're seeing, the gregarious version of myself. There's also versions of myself that are quiet and frightened and lonely and angry and curious and contemplative. And perhaps those last two you see little forms of in different videos, but more than anything, you're seeing the positive, smiling side of myself. And there is more to me than what you fully see on YouTube. Maybe I should do some videos in which I reveal those other aspects of my character, but this is a sincere side of me. I do really like to dress like this, not only for work, but when I go outside. Not every day. Yeah, I'm in a t-shirt sometimes, especially when I'm just relaxing, but I do dress like this in my normal life, and I do act like this when I'm socializing with people in my living room. This is me. What do you think about Modern no longer being on the Pro Tour? I personally am upset about it, and I disagree with the decision. I don't think it's a disaster or even anything worthy of me doing a rant video, but I will go on the record as saying I'm disappointed and that I think it was a wrong call. I disagree with the reasons given, but I understand them. But I don't think that they're right. I noticed that you refrain from cursing in your videos. Is there a reason behind that? Well, now that is actually part of my persona, because in real life, I swear like a sailor. I am a professor of language and words and ideas. I am against censorship and self-censorship, so I speak freely, and many times swearing is the most appropriate way to express yourself, and I certainly swear in the classroom, but I don't swear in my videos. So far, I don't believe I've sworn in a single video, because I do know that this is a wide variety of people who watch the channel, some with their young children, some who are young children themselves, and I am aware of that fact and that that is not the proper way to be expressing myself in this particular form of content. Now, I've been thinking, for example, about maybe bringing the camera into the classroom one day and showing a scene of a lecture of mine. Just turn it on and show 15-20 minutes of me giving a lecture. And in that video, you will hear me swear if not from my own expressions, then from simply reading aloud the literature that we're working with, because I teach adults in an adult college, and I am an adult, and we teach literature written by adults, and so yeah, adult language is used. But I don't think it is necessary for a Magic the Gathering product review. A few of them maybe came close, but what non-Magic the Gathering games have you recently been enjoying? I recently was given the game of Eclipse as a birthday present, and I cannot recommend it enough. It is a little bit pricey, definitely not as cheap as other games, but if you are a fan of space exploration and combat systems, this is a fabulous game. The biggest con about it is also one of its biggest strengths. It takes forever to get through, but that's great because you are building up your empire, upgrading your ships, researching new technology. I absolutely love and recommend Eclipse. Do you have a pet card from when you first started playing Magic? If so, what is it? When I was in high school, I loved the Urzalans. I loved the Urzalans. Part of it was that I loved artifacts back then, which are very, very different than most artifacts today, which largely take the form of equipment. But back in high school, artifacts really felt different than they do today, and I adored them. And so the Urzalans really were my special pet card because they came together and create all this mana, but it was colorless. And most of my friends said, well, that's not very useful because we need colored mana to cast all of our spells. And I was like, no, but I want to cast artifacts. I believe I put some probably terrible, horrible artifact deck together where I tried to destroy my opponents and their creatures with Aladdin's ring or whatever. But yes, I really adored the Urzalans back in high school. Do you think Wizards of the Coast should focus more on creating a good pro community or creating a good Friday Night Magic local game store community? Both. They are both critical. They are both important. This is not a choice that we have to make. We must invest both in the pro scene and circuit as well as the local game store. We need to be sending local game stores tokens and promos much more so than we currently do. We cut all support for game store leagues, so if a store isn't going to pay for its own league packets for prizes, then they're not going to have them. And this is the sort of thing where you got to spend money to make money, and we need to invest in supporting the local game store. And obviously it was a huge area of discussion recently, but the pro circuit and the pro players as well. These are ways in which we grow the brand, grow the game, not just satiating current players, but also enticing new ones. Who would win in a fight, Jace Beleren or Charles Xavier? Charles Xavier, no question. What would you change about Standard? I would want it to be longer before rotation as far as Standard is concerned. Standard rotates too quickly, in my opinion. I want to be able to keep my deck for longer. I want to be able to understand what's going on for longer. And so that's what I would do, is I would make it a lot more time in between rotations. Besides Merfolk, what is your favorite deck ever? Well, since you said my favorite deck ever is in a specific deck build, I would say that my favorite deck ever is the original version of what I played in last week's Community Super League, which was the original French Rights, an original Innistrad block. That was my deck. That was why I don't like Standard to rotate, because that deck rotated away, but that was my absolute favorite deck of the time and is still my absolute favorite deck of all time after, of course, Modern Merfolk. What was your favorite card from the original Innistrad? Well, along the lines that I just mentioned, my favorite card from original Innistrad was Unburial Rights, because it was the key piece of my favorite deck ever. Yeah, there's better cards in original Innistrad, but I love Unburial Rights and the deck that you build around it. What's one of your favorite combos in Magic? And again, since we're talking about my favorite combo, it's going to be from one of my favorite decks. Heck, my favorite deck, Merfolk, which is the combo that ensues when you have 2, Meroregery in play. Almost every other merfolk in your deck costs 2 mana, so if you have 2 Meroregery in play, tapping 2 islands to bring in a Lord of Atlantis allows you to untap 2 target permanents. You can untap those 2 islands, bring in another merfolk, and essentially empty out your hand onto the battlefield. I love it when those Meroregery triggers are going off, and I basically can just dump out all of my merfolk, and then at the very end, still have extra triggers to tap down my opponent's creatures, to untap my lands or Aether Vial again to bring out non-merfolk creatures. I really like that combo, and what I like best about it is that while it is powerful, it is not something that instantly wins the game. Far from it. What tribe in Magic do you think needs more support and possibly a legendary creature for Commander? Dwarves! Dwarves need to return. I don't care that in R&D's mind they serve the same role and behind the scenes as goblins or blah 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 blah. Bring back dwarves, make them in other colors as well as red, give us a legendary dwarf commander, give it to us in a main set, not just in a supplemental commander product. Bring back dwarves, come on. What sort of theme would you like to see the next new plane we visit have? I would like to see a set where the theme is wonder. What is your favorite Zelda game? Hands down, The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. What happened to your long hair? It was time to cut it. I cut my hair about once every 1 to 2 years, and actually if you look back over my videos, you can literally see when I cut it last, because I do go from long hair to short hair once before over the course of this channel, and now I shall allow it to grow out again, and at a certain point it will become so long that I'll sigh and go in and chop it off. But I am growing my long hair back. I'm doing it right now. Watch! Do you play Counter-Strike? Never played Counter-Strike, don't like Counter-Strike. I don't like any type of realistic simulation games of actual violence and warfare. I understand why they're popular. I don't have any problem with other people playing them. I am in no way someone who has ever felt that anything like that should not be enjoyed and played, but I don't like that sort of thing. Me personally, I am deeply uncomfortable by the idea of having a realistic-looking gun and shooting it in a realistic-looking setting at realistically someone else. I don't like Call of Duty. I don't like any of those games. I have played first-person shooters that are okay, but they're typically ones in which it does not look very realistic, and even those I didn't enjoy terribly. I don't like that level of violence. If you could remove any 3 sets from Magic, not counting Homelands, which would they be and why? Remove 3 sets of Magic? Are you mad? I'm not removing Magic. I love Magic. Even Homelands, I wouldn't get rid of it for the world. What is your favorite fiction anthology? Since the question called for an anthology specifically, I would have to recommend the Xenogenesis series by Octavia Butler. It is a excellent science fiction saga that I cannot recommend enough, especially if you like thoughtful and hard science fiction, the kind of science fiction that focuses on science and ideas more than fantasy and action. Xenogenesis, Octavia Butler. Check it out. What is your favorite color to play? Well, since we're just talking about favorite color to play and nothing about the aesthetic or ideals of that color, probably red. My most favorite color to play is just mono red. What is your favorite video game? Gonna have to go with Chrono Trigger here. Do you think a return to Kamigawa would be good for the game? Yes, I do, and I think we should go back to Kamigawa. I think that sets like Kamigawa, I think sets like Homelands are worthy of being revisited, expanded. Just because the mechanics of the cards were wrong the first time does not mean that the aesthetic of the set is not worth revisiting. And the fact that these questions come up again and again means that something strong about these settings resonated with the players, and that's exactly the sort of thing that you want to pursue. Yes, the cards were considered to be bad at the time, But that does not mean that we should not go back there someday and get it right. Should there be a better beginning product for new players to get into the game of Magic? Absolutely, there needs to be a better beginning product for brand new players to the game. In fact, I don't really think there is a sufficient product that serves as an entry point for someone who wants to get into Magic and can be specifically directed to a doorway, as it were, of a product where this is how you enter the game. You buy this to start here. There are many products that attempt to fill this role, far too many, and the fact that there are more than one. People might say, well, what about those welcome decks? What about a deck builder's toolkit? What about a couple intro packs? And on means we do not have the proper product. We need to get that. What format do you enjoy playing the most? Tough call, but I'd have to say that my absolute favorite format, just in terms of personal enjoyment to play, the gameplay itself, Modern. If you could make one impossible change to your channel, what would it be? I wish that I were not alone. You've said before that you don't like Planeswalker cards. What would you change about them? My biggest issue with the Planeswalker card type is the fact that it's very hard to interact with them, and that's seeing some changes as more and more cards say things like destroy target creature or Planeswalker, but largely the Planeswalkers hit the battlefield and it is very, very hard to interact with them. It's very, very easy for you to disrupt your opponents from interacting with your Planeswalkers, and that is highly problematic because Planeswalkers take over a game. 9 times out of 10, if you do not do something about your opponent's Planeswalker, then they are going to win or be put into an overwhelmingly winning position. And that's what I don't like about them. I can go through an entire game where we are playing and interacting, but then suddenly you draw that one card that you slam down, and there isn't anything I can do about it, and everything that happened prior is now rendered irrelevant, and I dislike that about Planeswalker cards. How were you introduced to Magic the Gathering for the first time? A girl I liked in high school taught it to me, and I learned it because I liked the girl. Where do you fall on the Johnny, Timmy, Spike spectrum? I dislike very much the spectrum of Timmy, Johnny, and Spike, because I feel it is not a spectrum at all, but rather 3 very narrow-minded views of players. I do not feel that any description of a player as a Johnny or a Timmy or a Spike is particularly positive, and it is all very, very limiting. When you say that a player is a Timmy, you are saying very much what they are not. You are saying what they don't do and what they don't enjoy. And I disagree so strongly with these ideas. Players are so much more complex than Timmy, Johnny, Spike. Hey, Professor, the Rolling Stones or the Beatles? The Beatles, I guess, but I'm not really a fan of music in general. I don't like either. Which do you like better, honey mustard, barbecue sauce, or ranch? Ranch. What is your take on the whole lawsuit against Wizards of the Coast? I'm not a lawyer, but a lawyer has looked at the lawsuit, MTG YouTuber Brian Rowe of Mythic MTG Tech, and given a really insightful takedown of just what is going on here. I can't comment on the actual lawsuit because, again, it is not my area of expertise. But I will say this, I do feel very strongly that judges in Magic the Gathering are super important and not currently given the full extent of payment and working conditions and rights that they deserve considering all they do for the game. And I am very much in favor of them getting more than they currently do. Without Magic the Gathering, how would your life be different? What would you be doing now? I would have fewer friends by far, and I would be plodding away in a thankless job, teaching something I love to people who have little to no interest in it, which is deeply, deeply sad. And so thank goodness for Magic the Gathering. And thank goodness for all 136,755 of you.